Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Today's guest is Sarah Hickey, a director and co-founder of the creative hybrid production company Monster and Bear in Melbourne, Victoria. With an impressive portfolio spanning both advertising and long-form TV shows, Sarah's journey began at the Queensland Conservatorium of Music before picking up a camera and transitioning to directing in 2013. In today's episode, we dive into Sarah's unique approach to storytelling, the critical importance of understanding the intention behind a piece, and how collaboration and empathy are central to her work. Sarah shares her valuable insights on the creative roles of producers, the benefits of early consultation with production teams, and the significance of fostering strong client relationships. We also discuss the evolving landscape of production in the advertising industry, particularly with the rise of digital technologies and AI. Whether you're an aspiring director, a seasoned producer, or just curious about the behind-the-scenes magic of filmmaking, this episode is packed with valuable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of advertising and production with the wonderful Sarah Hickey. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time. As we always start out, can you share a little bit about yourself, your journey into directing, and then how you transitioned into advertising?
Absolutely. So I actually come from a bit of a music background. I studied at the Queensland Conservatorium of Music, being a bit of a pop star wannabe back in the day, playing guitar, piano, singing, and moved to Melbourne because I had a love for music and arts in general. I was in Queensland at the time. And when I came down here, I through various means, ended up dabbling with music videos, playing around with interviews and documentaries. And I ended up just finding myself falling more in love with the film art form than I ever had for music. It's not to say it's not still, a big part of what I love within film. I'm a very audio and music focused kind of commercial director, I think. But yes, ever since then, I've sort of just been an opportunist at every point to be like, how can I do more of this? And it's eventually led me to collaborating with new people, starting a business. And over the years, it's really just been a matter of, seeing a half open door and being like, can I do more filmmaking if I open that door? And so it's been a lot of learning by doing. So that's the short version of the story without going into many nooks and crannies of that background. But I started in music, ended up in film, had friends in marketing departments that were like, could you make something for us for cheap, usually? And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll play around with that. Built a little bit of a folio and just found that, I really enjoyed and had a knack for directing.
So with directing, how long would you say you've been directing for?
I would say that technically it was around 2013 that I was directing in a more sort of like corporate branded sense and just, dipping my toes in the water, and then obviously playing around with music videos as well. And then I guess commercially since 2013, made my first short film that did quite well around 2015. And so I think there's two aspects of the directing work that I do, which is the commercial and then sometimes TV series work. A little bit behind the commercial directing. I started doing the narrative, and now I think there's a huge benefit to doing both personally. I think they both benefit each other in the tools and the skills that I've learnt and how they can apply across both styles. So, yeah, I do a bit of both.
And I would, and this is an assumption, and you can tell me otherwise. I would assume that one gives you certain passion, and I'm not saying that working on brands or ads is not you can't be passionate about that, but one fuels the other. I'm assuming, and you get something out of both. Would that be safe to say?
Absolutely. I think in commercial filmmaking, you've got such a small space of time to tell a very specific story or get a very specific message across. And so you have the time and you have the expectation is that you will go through a 30-second or a 15-second script and be meticulous in your storytelling. Every transition, every prop, every, what is the production, what is the framing, and all of this, you have the luxury, even on tight time frames. Like, I still would argue that in commercial storytelling, you have a bigger luxury with time to be meticulous with the nuance of your storytelling. Whereas with TV series work, you really are boot camped in having such a huge amount of material to film in even tighter time frames that it can often force you to be very intuition led. You can do all the planning in the world, but I do just feel like the pace and the the ever-changing nature, scripts can be changing up until the last minute. Like, you just don't get the same level of planning often when it's in the TV series territory. So I think that intuition allows you to be a really good problem solver and really calm on a commercial set, because you kind of just like, compared to, how much, shooting 8 minutes of drama, I've just got to get a 30-second spot out today. But because you've been meticulous and had a lot of planning and detail and technique and finesse in commercial work, I think some of that the visual styling and the elevation and being careful with planning out your transitions, whatever it might be, that side of things can bring a lot of value, as long as it doesn't take up too much time when you translate across to the TV series world. So I think that toggling between the two, I like the sort of massaging I get and the stimulation in different ways, because they're just such different ways of thinking. I think when working on narrative projects, like, so much emphasis is on character and story and how that's all linked in, sort of nuanced ways to build story and arcs. And obviously when you're in long form, you've got so much more time to explore the writing and the depth of character and all of this sort of richness that is obviously you just don't have the time to play with when you're in the commercial world. But when you are developing a script for a TVC, or you have such a split moment to tell a rich story, you can take your storytelling capabilities from that narrative world and sometimes you feel like a surgeon, like trying to piece together this story and making sure you don't miss anything when you've got multiple directors across a series of work, what seed has been planted in episode 1 that's got to be carried through in episode 4. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff in 30 seconds. But there is a richness and nuance of, say, character-driven works or dialogue-driven TVCs or, performance-based works that, all of that storytelling, you really have to find a way to compress that and make it just as impactful in a short space of time. And so I definitely feel that there's storytelling sensibilities that can come back across to the commercial world given. And so through doing commercial work, I would say I'm actually a very technical director to pair with that performance-based side of things, so that there are just techniques that I can try and suggest in elevating transitions or enhancing the script or the storytelling. You don't always get to explore them, is the sad thing, because the reality of how tight those schedules are.
What are the key focuses for you when you are creating a commercial that really elevates the impact? Is it the people you hire? Is it the locations you use? What gives you that little bit more that elevates it into that area where you could, ultimately want to craft like a narrative story? But
yeah, well, I think it's it always comes back to what the intention is of the piece. I think that when you're given a concept, whether it is already something that's conceptualized by an agency or by a brand, I think intention, understanding the intention of a piece, it's the same as in narrative world, knowing what the theme is or what's the point of the story that we're telling. in commercial, there's usually a clearer intent. It might be a way of measuring how a campaign is going to be successful. Or is it a sales piece? Is it just a brand awareness piece and people want to take away a feeling, and that's, it's a bit less quantifiable. Like, I think understanding what the client wants out of the piece is going to drive it should drive every decision that you make creatively beyond that, because I think it's less about you as a director and what you want to make for yourself. You have a whole audience to consider. Who's at the receiving end of this? What research can you do to see what those people are already watching and resonating with them? And then I think relatability is a really big thing for me. I think in most of the campaigns or content pieces we make, say, how are you holding a mirror up? I hate it's such a trope, isn't it? How do you hold a mirror up to society, to show them what they want to see or what they can relate to in themselves in those 30 seconds that you have? Because that's what's going to drive someone to go, this brand gets me. This brand, like, I want to align with this brand, or I want to purchase their product. And there is nuance and there is empathy involved in understanding that audience. So I think there's a common trait I think most directors have, and I think that is empathy. Or we are the kinds of people who will sit at a cafe for 4 hours and just watch people happily, because we enjoy trying to understand human behavior. Or maybe I'm just speaking on behalf of myself, but I think I have a lot of these chats with directors and they feel the same.
Monster and Bear, you started the company. Do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown about what it is and how long it's been around for?
Yeah, so I run a commercial production company, or we call ourselves a creative hybrid and production company now. We started our production house in 2013. At the time, it was one of those opportunist moments where I was working at a job I didn't like so much, and just started putting my hand up and going, hey, do you guys need marketing material? I'm a filmmaker. I've got these awesome collaborators. And we ended up getting this quite sizable contract, which kicked off our first year of business with this company that I was essentially working at as a student advisor, of all things. Would you take advice from this face? But then after, to sort of quitting that job and working for them as a freelancer or as a collective, we actually used that opportunity to build a film studio here in Brunswick, which is actually where I'm zooming in from. We sort of over the years have used that singular opportunity to then go, this is it. Like, how do we maximize this opportunity that we've taken to build a studio? We're just going to have to hustle and find more clients. Like, how do we keep this ball rolling so that when our year-long contract finishes, we had this ticking clock, right? Like 12 months later, if we didn't have enough clients to sustain ongoing business, I'm going to have to go back to this horrible job. I shouldn't say that in case anyone's listening, but, it wasn't filmmaking. So for me, it was a horrible job. And we did it. It was a slog for the first 3 to 4 years. There were definitely dicey moments, as with any business owner will tell you, but we just hustled really, really hard. We kept making the kinds of work that we wanted to attract, even if it meant making it off our own. What's the saying? Putting some skin in the game, off your own nose.
Skin in the game. Something. Skin in the game.
Yeah, we had skin in the game. So we would just, trying to make the kinds of things that we were trying to attract. And over the years, we've built a team of people around us that, are all part of that film family and commercial filmmaking.
Now, I know we've talked a little bit about your own experience, but what do you believe are the key qualities that make a standout director in today's advertising industry?
I think of directors in commercial land as like the carrier pigeons of nuance between the message that's trying to be conveyed and the audience that's receiving it. I find that film is actually quite an unforgiving platform as it is, because if you miss, audience expectations are so high, and so your audience is so smart and learnt to consume at a pace that's crazy. that if you drop the ball on a particular aspect, your whole thing falls apart. So the nuance of each detail of every frame and how you tell that story or get that message across in such a short space of time. I like to think that directors are like the carrier pigeons of that nuance, and in a very detailed way. I think most directors who do well are people who'll go through with a scalpel or a fine tooth and think about every corner of every frame, because it all matters in that very short space of time that you have. So, yeah.
Creative process. So how do you approach a new advertising campaign or project? Can you walk us through your process, like from ideation to execution?
So when a script or a concept comes through to me as a director, the first thing I'll do is obviously you're going to read the script, you're going to have initial thoughts, and your intuition will speak to you in various ways right off the bat. But I do think then there is a bit of a script assessment that needs to happen. I tend to go through and be like, well, in order to tell this story, what are the key elements that really need to be enhanced, and what kind of collaborators do I need to have around me to support that process? So whether it's maybe it is a really heavily VFX based concept, and that's obviously, I'm not on the tools to do that. I'll have ideas and I know a lot of technical ways to execute something, but first thing I'll be doing is picking up the phone to one of my favorite VFX artists and being like, hey, I've got this brief. I want to make it as good as it can be. I have this half-baked idea on how I can elevate it. Is that actually possible? Or can you tell me of anything else that you would be inspired to do with it? And then how could I accommodate that? I think directors tend to silo themselves quite a lot from what I hear, and think that the responsibility to execute or have every speck of ideas is all on them. Whereas I think once we recognize that we are actually a cog in the machine as well, obviously a little more authority at times, but once you recognize that you're part of the machine and you actually have support and you have collaborators and specialists around you, like the weight that gets taken off your shoulders when you go, man, that's a resource I can tap into. Not only that, but then if you do get the job across the line and the client likes the way you've treated on it, you have a team that have got some skin in the game. They have got a sense of ownership over their aspect because they've had input early. So I think in terms of process, I like to, at all stages, lean on and consult with my team and my collaborators, but then also make sure that you're tapping into the client in the same way. They know the brand, they know the story, they know the research. Like, I think that clients really appreciate it when a lot of questions get asked, and you accept that you don't know the answers to everything, instead of feeling like you have to have the answers for everything. That's not the role of a director.
And then off the back of that, so collaboration with either agencies or even clients, how do you foster that working relationship? Have you got some best practices, to ensure smooth collaboration, smooth and harmony working together?
Yeah, I think it's actually a mindset shift to thinking of there is no us and them. Like, I think that you can fall into the trap of when maybe a client gives you some information that maybe rubs you a little bit the wrong way, or it's not the way you'd like to work, or there's something about the concept. You're like, oh, really? That's where you've landed on that? I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a collective us. Of course, you've got people who've got that are the money behind and making the key decisions. But once a decision is made, it's like, great, how do we make the most of those parameters and what we're doing? And just thinking of it as they are an extension of your team and you're an extension of theirs. I think regular check-ins seems like an obvious thing to say, but I think a lot of people, if you haven't got that mindset right of thinking of this as an enjoyable collaborative process, people tend to not have as many check-ins with the client as they probably should have. I'm a really, really big fan of signing off as many aspects of a production before the shoot day, because I don't know if you've heard me talk about time as a commodity throughout this whole interview, but you just don't want to be having conversations on the filming day that could have been had in the lead up. And that time when you have a full crew and you have a lot to get through in a short space of time, you don't want to be having those avoidable conversations that come from the beautiful process of collaborating in the lead up. So if you can, it's a win-win. If you get to have fun and think of your client as a collaborator, not only does it sort of shift the way you talk and the language and how you arrange those check-ins and those meetups, but it also, it allows you to free up more time and have more autonomy to do what you do best on the shoot day without interruption.
And so working with producers, now from your perspective, what qualities make a standout producer that you like to work with in the advertising environment? How can they add to the production process? Have you got any ideas or thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think, and you probably might have more insights into this even than I do, but I feel like there's a lot of people who think of a producing role as quite administrative, like a facilitator or a project manager. And of course, there's that hybrid nature to it. Like, definitely a producer needs to be organized and be all of those things. But a producer should be creative and should challenge, not challenge, like have healthy discussions around the why of decisions that a director is making. Like, I actually really appreciate it when I'm working with a producer who goes, I can see what you're going for there, but have you thought about this? Or, and actually just like thinking of their role as actually a lot more of a creative contributor than someone who is just a project manager. I know that most experienced producers know this, that it is actually a highly creative role. But I think that some producers think that their role is to project manage and to facilitate the director's ideas wholly. And it's not that. Sometimes the director is looking for a sounding board or hoping for it, and a good producer can be that, as well as, thinking about how that falls into the logistical parameters and the broader client management and timelines.
So your production team that you work with, obviously you have people that you like to work with, you have your individuals that you like to lean on, that you like to collaborate with. When do you like to start to bring them in to your project? As early as possible?
Yeah, I think it is concept dependent, like how early you bring your production team into the process, because you want to value people's time as well. Like, you don't necessarily want to be having meetings that don't have to be, like, I know that everyone's busy, but at the same time, I think for the most part, regardless of what someone's role is, they really appreciate that consulting sort of nature of being brought into the process early. I always use VFX as a really good example, because it's just, you should never obviously use that as an afterthought, but I think there's an art to sort of thinking about which departments need to speak to each other early. So as much as it can be about me wanting to have a chat to a particular role, and I know this ties in with how the director's working with the producer too, but it might be that actually we need the VFX artist to be talking to the DOP before we even pitch an idea, because that is so directly linked to the type of camera and camera movement we're going to have on the day. It's tied in with budget, like all of the, with experience and with more complex content ideas, you do start to put the pieces together about who needs to, or who's beneficial to speak to who and at what point in the process. And so I don't think there's a hard and fast rule around who I speak to when. I think that has come with experience over time. So it's more that I actually value the taking a step further back from that. And it's actually about designing a creative workflow and an order that is bespoke to a project.
Do you think it's crucial that directors should know what things cost?
Look, I think there's a fine line with, I think in this state when things are being a bit more frugal and the budgets are tighter, that there's a huge benefit to being a director who's maybe dabbled in producing or, experienced other departments. I think in general, to be a good director, having that perspective is a good thing anyway. But specifically with finances, look, I mean, there are directors in this world that get hired for having massive ideas, and it's the producer's job to scramble and find money or ways to make that work. But I think, on a personal level, and probably because I run a business as well, I actually kind of pride myself on knowing what the sandbox is, what are the parameters, and how can I make the most of that without stressing someone's wallet out. So I personally have obviously done some producing myself, even as being part of being a managing partner of a business. I think those parameters are important to consider, but that's just my opinion. And I think that it's possible to be highly creative whilst staying within the sandbox. So if worst case scenario, if you are a director who's just highly creative, the producer and the director at least need to be able to have highly transparent conversations about the scoping and those parameters. So it does fall a little bit more on a producer to be able to facilitate that conversation. If a director is a little bit more just like someone who gets hired for big, crazy ideas, and then it's the question of, okay, that might not be possible, but could we come up with something that's sitting within here? I'm just the sort of person that I'd rather not waste my time coming up with the big crazy ideas if they're already out of scope, and knowing ballpark that what I'm spending time on is going to be achievable.
So when it comes to directing, time management as a director, what are your best time management tips, for juggling multiple projects?
Yeah, and this probably falls back into being more of a business owner than a director per se. When I'm on a TV series, I feel like my time's kind of somewhat managed for me. I have meetings booked me after meeting, and it's like I can't control that beast. But when things are in my control and I have, overlapping projects or things that are, I definitely tend to sort of lean on time management tool. Like we use Monday here at Monster and Bear, and I spend quite a lot of time with like mentors and operations side of things to try and streamline how can I make my deadlines really succinct? How can I assign things to different people in a way that comes up in a clean list of deadlines and priorities? And so, I think there's a lot of tools out there now that you can absolutely nerd out over if it's your thing, to set up your time in a way that, at least underwhelms your brain a little bit, because otherwise if it's all just here and not in something that sort of lays it out in a clean, streamlined way, I'm prone to getting a little bit stressed and anxious, just like anyone else. So yeah, I think playing around with those tools and what's out there now, especially with the, AI, the pace that it's evolving at and the way that can be linked in with time management tools, I think people should really tap into what's there, because there's some good stuff.
What advice would you give to a new director who's starting out in the advertising world?
I think there's two things that I would say to someone who's just starting out, which is that you probably, one of the first things you're going to want or need to do is build a little folio of work of some sort. There's a lot of risk involved in taking a chance on someone new, but the things that you make or your sensibilities are the parts of you that are sellable in getting your career up off the ground. And so I think making things, even if it is pulling together, students, friends, collaborators, you're probably going to have to hustle a little bit to make some little specky things that show what you can do, even if it is on a smaller budget, or, just making something that is your product. You have to have something sellable, I think, as a director before someone is going to take a big leap or chance on you. There's too much on the line as a producer or as a brand. It costs too much to make something. So a folio of work is the biggest confidence that you can give to someone. I would just be doing anything you can to build that. But then on top of that, that folio is it's next to useless unless you're meeting people in the right places. And so I would just say, not in a salesy way, but like just try to put yourself in as many environments where you're incidentally meeting people who are in places that are in a position of hiring people like you. And not in a meeting, of course, arrange the coffee dates, but like if there are more casual settings where you can meet someone and make friends. I hate to say it, but like having friends in the right places is one of the best things you can do for your career in commercial or narrative, because people like to work with people they like. And you incidentally, through having conversations about what you're passionate about and in a more sort of casual setting, they'll get a sense of what you're about. Your personality and the way you talk about your work and the way you can hold yourself in a room, I mean, they're hugely, they are traits that you will get hired for as a director. So it doesn't change. Like they'll see that in a casual or networking setting. So put yourself in some of those and have the folio ready for when the opportunity comes up.
Future of advertising and production within that. How do you see the role of production evolving in the advertising industry with the increasing integration of digital technologies, new media, etc.?
Yeah, it's so, I mean, it can be quite overwhelming to think about where it's heading, how noisy all the platforms are, like where content is landing, how much technology there is to keep up with. I think I listened to something the other day that said we're absorbing change at a pace. If you went back 100 years, the amount of change we experienced in 10 years, we're now experiencing in somewhere between like 2 to 4 weeks or something crazy like that. And it's getting exponential. So I think first and foremost, we have to all like accept that it's all about to get a bit crazy. It's going to get very noisy and there's going to be a lot of evolution that it's actually impossible to keep up with. So I think we need to just stay in. I think there will hit a bit of a tipping point where it really does come back to humanness, where AI will definitely have its time over the next 10 years. And I think we just have to exist alongside it and think about how can we can't slow or stop that pace of change, but how can we use what is out there and what we know about it in our own small way, like to enhance what we do. There's a lot of people who are being resistant. There's a lot of people who are being fully embracing to the point. But I think it's about working alongside technology, not losing our humanity in the way that we're telling stories or releasing content, but how can we use it as a tool to either make our lives easier as we make it or to slightly enhance what we're already doing well. And yeah, I think that if we can just try to hold on to some sort of like ethical semblance of how that technology can work with us to hold on to the best parts of our humanity, I think we'll be okay.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you taking the time to chat. Great to chat with a director, great to chat with a female director. And I'm sure that there's insight that you have that people, up and comers, male or female, will certainly value and take with them on their journey forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Hope you have a good one.
Well, that's it for today on Make the Logo Bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.